When writing a basic query, coming up with the select and from parts should be fairly easy to decide. It's simply what tables you're interested in and what columns in that table you want to see. But writing the where part, where you're specifying the condition or what's officially called a predicate, well, that can give you a few more options to choose from. Now, writing a where clause to go against a particular table, it's a bit like writing an if statement in a conventional programming language. You're trying to describe something that at heart is either true or false. So if I want to go against this table and bring back all the rows where people have a certain last name, it's either true or it is false. It's the same for if they have a certain email address, or their employee ID is in a particular range, or they were hired after a specific date. It's either true, they match that condition, or false, that they don't. And how you write this part, this where statement, kind of depends on the data that you're matching to and how specific you want to be. So let's go through a few examples. So right now, if I wanted to select all the rows where the last name of the employee was equal to green, well, this is the way I would do it. And if it was text that I'm matching on, I need to write that in quotes. Now, unlike most general-purpose programming languages, strings in SQL use single quotes, not double quotes here. I'll say that again because it's important. String values in SQL are surrounded with single quotes. It is one of those situations where some database management systems will be flexible, and they'll allow you to use either single or double quotes, but if you're talking classic SQL, it's single quotes. Also notice, if you're coming from a C-based language, we don't use the double equals sign here for equality, it's just single equals. And we also don't need to surround our condition, our predicate, in parentheses, though you can if it helps. By default, in most database systems, this comparison would be case insensitive. It doesn't matter if I use an uppercase G or a lowercase g here in green, and it wouldn't matter if it was uppercase or lowercase g as it's actually stored in the database, although this is something that can be changed from database to database. Most management systems offer the option to make these kinds of checks case sensitive. If, on the other hand, I'm checking a number, something that is stored as a numeric column, employee ID, for example, I don't need the quotes. I just directly ask if it's equal to that particular value. And if we're working with numeric options like salary, I have the comparison operators. We have the operators that you might expect: greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, and not equal is written with the less than and greater than signs right next to each other. So in this case, I'm asking for all the rows where salary is greater than 50,000. And you can also use and or to combine multiple conditions in your where clause. So in this case, I'll say where salary is greater than 50,000 and the department column value is equal to sales. And particularly for those of you coming from C-based languages, we actually use the word and or, not vertical bars or ampersands. So in this case, a perfectly acceptable way to check if the value of department is equal to marketing or it's equal to sales, we're going to bring back all those rows. Now, if you wanted to check for multiple values where you're interested in the same column having several different options, in this case, department being marketing or sales, we can also use the word in and then surround multiple values inside parentheses, separating them by commas. Because I'm checking for a text value, I need to surround each independent value with the single quotes and just separate them by commas here. If, on the other hand, what you're looking to do is be a bit more flexible on matching text, then instead of using the equal sign, which wants an exact match, we can use the SQL keyword like. Now, in a lot of other programming languages or other ways of doing wildcard searches, you use a wildcard character of an asterisk, but in SQL, it's the % sign. So I'm asking here where the last name column is like, green, and then anything after this. So this query would match all the rows with green in that column, but also green span, green burr, green away, and so on. The wildcard can be placed at the end of the text, it can be placed in the middle, it can be placed at the start, and it will match any number of characters. If, however, you're just looking to match on a single letter, you could represent that with an underscore in your like statement, which in this case would bring back anything that matches on Smith with an I or Smith with a Y, or any letter there. However, do understand that in large tables, using like can be quite inefficient as it's more demanding on the database to check multiple possible contents of a particular column value rather than just checking for pure equality, which is a lot easier to do. What about null? I've talked about the idea of null values in a database. Some columns can be set to allow null, meaning the lack of a value. And often you want to find out if that is the case or not the case in your where clause. So let's say this employee table that I've defined has a column called middle initial, and that has been set to allow null values when people simply don't have a middle initial. Now, if I wanted to find those people, I might first think to write something like this, where middle initial equals null. But actually, equals is not a good word to use when we're checking for the existence of null, because it's not equal to null, because null isn't a value. It's not equal to anything. What we want instead is the word is. So instead of middle initial equals null, it's where middle initial is null. And this would bring back all the rows where there had been no value stored in that column. Conversely, if I'm just interested in the rows that have a value in that column, well, we can say instead is not null and execute that. And now we'd only get the rows where that column actually had a value for each row. And this covers the basics of the most commonly used options in where clauses. I'm not trying to cover everything. Take a look at SQL Essential Training for a few more options.